good evening and thank you for coming. My name's Ben Hickey. I'm the curator of exhibitions here at the Hilliard Museum. We appreciate your support via attendance. Can't thank you enough. This event is part of our Creative Conversations series. Every Wednesday night during the semester, we put on a lecture, a panel, a musical performance, a film screening. It's part of our free admission on Wednesday evenings, where we try and amplify the messages in our exhibitions and give you a little bit, something a little bit extra. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator who will kick things off, Maggie Perkins. She's the Community Engagement Specialist at Codafil. So everyone please give her and the panel a round of applause.
Thanks. Merci. Alors, moi, j'ai fait l'exposition à côté. I did the exhibit next door as part of our 50th anniversary at Codafil. It was created in 1968, so we're having a kind of a big year with lots of activities this year. Et j'ai travaillé avec Ben et avec le Hilliard pour le faire. I worked with Ben and the Hilliard, and they've been absolutely fabulous. I would like to thank them. I don't feel like I thanked them enough in my little speech at the opening for our exhibit. So thank you again, Ben and Chris Pavlik and everyone at the Hilliard who helped us with that. And if you have a chance to go next door and see it, excuse me, please do. And during our opening for that exhibit, I sort of, not even knowing myself, kind of decided to launch a campaign of like make French normal again, right? Because we made it cool and now it's just still not quite normal. You know, it's like kind of weird and awkward, and then you're like, oh, do I start in French? Like what happens? Will they speak French back to me? I don't know. Will no one understand me? And I think it's kind of an interesting question given the topic of this panel, which is French oral poetry, and why do we keep singing in French? You know, if we stopped speaking it every single day in the street with everybody that we know, why do we keep singing in French, right? And I've talked to Barry before about he's talked to me about the idea of a performance language. So I have a PhD in French studies, but mostly in kind of linguistics at LSU. And performance language can be two things, in a way. You can say that something like ancient Hebrew is a performance language because when someone does their bar mitzvah, they're going to read in ancient Hebrew, and it's part of sort of the rite of that action. I mean, you can't just go up and be like, hey, I'm 13, bye, bar mitzvah over. No, that doesn't work. You know, you have to, and they go to Hebrew school for years. Every week they go to Hebrew school to learn how to pronounce the ancient Hebrew, and it's ancient Hebrew. It's not modern Hebrew. It's not even terribly useful if they were to go to Israel and try and speak it. They don't. And I read something, this kid who was in Hebrew school who said, I know how to say sovereign of the universe, but I don't know how to say you are. Like, I just don't know how to say all these fancy things. So that's one version of a performance language. And then the other version, the other way that we talk about something being a performance language is often with minority languages like French in Louisiana or Irish, Gaelic, Scots Gaelic, other minority languages in the world where it's become a marker of identity, but it's lost so many of its places in the community where it's just normal to speak it, so that when you use it, you're almost doing it to show your identity. That's almost the purpose of it, is to tell a joke in French, or to curse in French because you're so mad, or to, you know, its purpose is to show your identity. And that's still a good thing, but at the same time, it's not normal, right? It's not normal speech. So it's kind of a delicate balance. In a way, it's really good that French is a performance language because music itself, I would say, has been such a huge factor in keeping French going. You know, it's been this safe kind of domain for French where it is normal to sing in French in Louisiana. That's normal. Nobody's going to question you about that. You don't have to feel awkward. I mean, I don't know, I'm saying this, but I don't actually sing in French, so maybe we should talk to the people who sing in French, right? But I don't find it weird, at least. But that's basically something I just wanted to get out there, starting it off the conversation about performance languages and sort of the different aspects of performing an identity or performing almost a religious rite in a language, right? Where the language ties into an action almost of making something almost more concrete. But, I don't know. You want to go ahead and start, Barry?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. You don't mind? You can stay with us. Thank you. Maggie has put this together, this really lovely exhibition there representing the 50 years of Codafil. Of course, you could have filled this building too if we had time and resources, but it was quite a challenge. You know, this is tied to Festivals Acadiens Creoles, which is going to be happening in not this weekend but the next, nearby Girard Park, and also on the front lawn of the Hayes Townhouse. And so I found myself trying to figure out, how in the world do you tie the 50th anniversary of Codafil to Festivals Acadiens? Now there is one direct tie, and that is that Codafil helped to launch Festivals Acadiens, what became Festivals Acadiens in 1974, March 26, 1974, a rainy Tuesday night. They put on this concert at the Blackham Coliseum, and it ended up becoming an annual event. The performer who's sitting up here, who performed at the earliest in that process, was Zachary Richard, who performed in '75, the second year that it was held. And some of you may remember that. He had a fist in the air and a flag in the back, and it was a really emotional statement about survival, about who we are, about our language. And God bless him for it, sang Réveil that night, which became an anthem, except that a lot of people that night kind of didn't understand why Eddie Richard's son was so mad. What was he doing yelling up there, and fist in the air? And as far as I know, sort of avoided singing it at the festival again. Played at the festival for years and years and years and years, but kind of avoided that song. And then about maybe 7 or 8 years later, we were outside in Girard Park, and he decided to sing the song again as an encore. And that time, the crowd sang with him, which gets back to what Maggie was talking about, how music and lyrics have contributed mightily to the preservation of what we have in Louisiana. And it wasn't only, although my dear friend Zachary Richard is an amazing performer, an emotional performer, world of talent, great voice, it also had to do with the lyrics. It also had to do with the message that he composed himself as well. So what we're going to do this evening, just for this discussion, is talk about that. Talk about, and it's kind of ironic, isn't it, that we're talking about this in English? But I suspect si on changeait en français, à peu près la moitié du monde partirait, peut-être pas la moitié, mais we'd lose some of the audience. And we've learned over the years to be. Yeah, everybody up. Part of the point is everybody up here could do that for various reasons, and one of the things I want to explore is those reasons. But so on the one hand, what we're going to discuss is lyrics, oral poetry, and I should say that I am here in part in my capacity as Louisiana's French poet laureate. Happened earlier this past year. Zachary Richard is the previous one. And so this is one of the things that interests me. And on the one hand, what we're talking about is, that we're talking about two different branches. One, on the one hand, the preservation of a treasure trove of oral poetry that goes all the way back to the Middle Ages. through explorations recently in such collections as the Lomax collection from 1934, and more recently Harry Oster's and Catherine Blanchette's collection, and others that have been done, we've discovered that we miraculously preserved songs in French in Louisiana that go back to the middle of the Middle Ages, like the 12th century, 13th century, 14th century. It's absolutely stunning. And this doesn't happen everywhere in the French-speaking world. That kind of thing typically happens on the edges, on the margins, where, you know, in the middle of in Paris or Bordeaux or what, they're not worried about preserving. I mean, it's just taken for granted. Here, we're hanging on to it by white-knuckled fingertips, right? Because it's precious. And so, on the one hand, we have that, and some of that oral poetry has informed and influenced and been revived in remarkable ways. You know, in a process that I've come to call the production of brand new old songs. I'll play you a couple examples in a minute. And then the other side of that is, if you have that as a heritage, if you have those poetic strategies, those notions, those images, the rhyming strategies, the rhythm strategies, the storylines, if you have those in your heritage, in your sort of cultural DNA, then you have that to draw on to produce new songs like those that we've seen over the last 50 years of Codafil's existence. And the third leg of that tripod, you have the creative young people, but the third leg of that tripod is that they have to have the tool of the French language in their tool chest. They have to be able to use that. They have to be able to draw on that, or otherwise you'd be doing something interesting but remarkably different. And there have been some really great songwriters from this area who have elected to compose their songs in English, and that's a wonderful thing. But this other thing that we have, the ongoing production, creativity, and performance of this, both the old stuff and the new stuff, is absolutely nothing short of a miracle. 50 years after the creation of Codafil, and literally 100 years in some accounts, 200 years in other accounts, after people predicted that French would disappear from Louisiana. And yet, on est toujours là, toujours après, radoté, emmerdé, en français. So let me introduce to you who's here, and this kind of, it can be a free-for-all, that's okay. All of these people sitting here have participated in pretty much the processes that I've just been describing. Zachary Richard, I've talked about, who has revived old songs and produced amazing new songs over his long career. Steve Riley and David Greeley, who were founding members of the Mamou Playboys, who also delved into the past and found old songs and honored them by reviving them and re-energizing them, but also turned to creation and started writing songs of their own, and they'll talk about that in a minute. Chris Stafford done exactly the same thing with his group Fufole, digging into old songs from the Lomax collection and other things, and more recently the Oster collection, and helping us to record the double CD that's going to be coming out. It's supposed to arrive Friday, honoring the lyrical legacy of César Vincent, a singer from Vermilion Parish, and has also turned to creation and written some new songs and recorded those. Zach Fusier, same thing, been digging in the past, sometimes not so much all as far back as that, but you know, some of the early 20th century stuff, and you started to compose as well. A couple. Yeah, and Jordan Thibodeau, who sort of roared out of the Wiles about a year or two ago, and got interested. He's interested in the old stuff and has been producing some amazing new poetry that he's been singing on his new album. What's the name of the group? Les Rodailleurs. So all of these people have participated in what I was talking about, and maybe in deference to experience, Zachary, you want to talk a little bit about about what you've done in that regard?
Age before beauty.
That's why I started.
J'essaie de comprendre qu'est-ce que je fais là, d'abord. Il me semble que il y a plusieurs images qui me sortent dans la tête. Moi, comme toi, avons eu une relation intime avec des monolingues francophones. Our grandparents did not speak English. That is like something that is unfortunately gone. Ça fait que moi j'avais une relation toute particulière qui était basée d'abord sur l'amour, parce que j'aimais beaucoup mes grands-parents. Et puis j'essaye, ma relation avec la langue française, ça pourrait être le chinois, mais j'analyse ça et puis j'ai beaucoup réfléchi, j'essaie de recréer cette ambiance de joie que je trouvais dans la maison d'André Boudreau quand il fumait sa cigarette, buvait son whisky, puis contait ses histoires. Et ma grand-mère dansait les quatre coins de son mouchoir. Alors, il y avait l'amour, mais il y avait aussi le rejet parce que moi, comme toi, je suis venu dans le monde créatif dans les années 60, à la fin des années 60, donc il y avait un mouvement contestataire. Et juste pour la petite anecdote, quand j'ai fait le deuxième festival en 75, je ne l'ai pas fait pour 7 ans par la suite, parce que Jimmy DiMaggio m'avait banni. Hein? He said, that son of a bitch, he's never going to play this festival.
Going all Québécois on us.
La notion qu'on était relégué à une deuxième zone, that somehow Cajun culture, language, identity was less than, was always struck me as something that was completely unacceptable. Ça fait que c'était comme, OK. Donc, mon attachement, c'est like a Janice said, d'un côté, il y a de l'amour, et de l'autre côté, il y a de la révolte. There's resistance to this notion that somehow our culture was less than. What was the question?
Well, maybe you could talk a little bit about honoring the past, but also the importance of creativity.
Well, then my relationship to the music.
Well, you also answered another question that I'd like to ask everybody, if you keep this in mind. How is it that you speak French? As he said, nous on a grandi dans des maisons. I mean, I wanted my grandmother to love me, so right. And but then we also went to school.
Yeah, but we also went to school. We were lucky because we were in a school that there was a very good French class. So not only did we have the love of the language, but we had the ability to write it, which is fundamental to the survival of any linguistic culture. That's a whole other question.
The irony is that French survived up to our time because they hadn't gone to school much, or the most likely francophones were the ones who were least likely to have had a lot of education. That shifted in our time, where all of a sudden it was exactly the opposite.
What was the question?
Yep.
I didn't know anything about Cajun music when I was a teenager. I don't think you did either.
Ira LeJeune, Daddy listened to it.
I knew it existed parce que quand j'allais chez ma grand-mère, she would watch Passepartout on Channel 10. So I knew there was a thing called Cajun music, but I didn't know anything about it. I listened to the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, and I went to New York and got a record contract and had $400 left over. And I had to go back, I don't know how many times, until Mark Sawa finally sold me that accordion, because he refused to do it a number of times. I had to prove myself, I guess. So then it was like, I had it's a turntable. Lawrence Walker, Aldous Roger, Ira Lejeune. But Ira Lejeune was tough because it wasn't really in tune. So I'd take my C accordion and I'd play a couple of notes and I'd try to figure out what the hell just happened. And j'étais propulsé dans ce monde qui m'inspire toujours, and which is the real question for me is why? Why do I give a shit about this old music that is vraiment dépassé? My parents didn't listen to it. They didn't really like it. There was no musicians in my family, so I wasn't really exposed to it. But I loved the music, and this thing was ferocious in its attraction and the feeling that it gave to me. So the question is why? I mean, and I think that we all share that, because we play this music, we're part of this tradition because we cannot help ourselves. There's something that is so ferociously attractive in this cultural expression that we want to be a part of it, which is why French will survive in Louisiana, because as Maggie was saying, it's cool. That you have to have something that touches you. You can't be forced to like something. You like it because somehow it resonates in your heart and your soul. So there's something, c'est ton joke. Pourquoi, chaque fois qu'on s'apprête à fermer le cercueil sur le cadavre de la culture, le cadavre se lève puis demande une bière. There's something fundamentally, I don't even know what the word is. Ça résiste. Why did Steve Riley start playing Cajun music? Why did David Greer? Why did anybody? Why did I start playing? Why? Because there's something in it that is so powerful that we want to be a part of it. And I don't understand it. I'm just happy to be here.
By the way, those of you, a lot of people laughed at his joke. Those of you who didn't, I'm assuming you didn't understand it. Now you really want to learn French, don't you? I used to do that at the Liberty Theater. I'd tell jokes in French, and about 3/4 of the crowd would laugh, and the other quarter would say, "What do you say? What do you say?" It was a great motivator. Yeah, well, so I think you just nailed something important.
So translate the
Why?
joke, though.
What, huh?
Translate the joke.
No. Let him.
All right.
Which brings us to Steve and David. How did you, as Zachary just pointed out, we grew up in households with monolingual speakers. So, that was a different issue. Y'all grew up that wasn't an issue. It was a different issue that brought you to French.
Well, for me, I was taken with the fiddle, and I kind of had it in the back of my mind. My grandfather's, whose name was Eddie Theriot, who was a French speaker, was a fiddle player. I'd never heard him play, but all the family said they were glad Dad took it up because it was in the family again. So I ended up in Nashville, and I met Joël Saunier there, and I said, I want to learn Cajun music, but I haven't heard anything I liked yet. He said, you need to listen to the Balfour Brothers. So when I got the Balfour Brothers record, I went, oh my God. I went crazy, obsession. It was the best music I'd ever heard. I can't explain it. It's the rhythms, it's the emotion, it's the freedom in it, because I've been playing other styles of traditional music where you have to know this fiddle tune, and it's so many notes that there's no room to create anything in it, almost, But Cajun music had a lot of room. So I started doing it and singing it phonetically. And bless his heart, Blackie Forestier, I was in Texas at the time. Blackie Forestier used to come to San Antonio to the Riverwalk, and he'd come and hear me play. And finally one day he said, David, your music's beautiful, but I can't understand the words you're singing. And I got really embarrassed and stopped at an all-night drugstore on the way home and bought a French grammar, paperback grammar about this thick, and I read it. And then started looking at the work that people like you did, like putting all the lyrics on the album cover so I could cross out the parts they didn't say, you know, and learn exactly what they were saying and why and what it meant, because I knew I'd mess it up if I didn't. And that was the start, and I realized I was learning my grandfather's language, and that meant a lot to me, you know. It had been interrupted in one generation because they had married Americans. And
But you learned French in a kind of an interesting way, other than the grammar. You went to the archives.
yeah, well, after that, it was like once I started to get a handle on it with the songs, I met you, and you grabbed me by the elbow and dragged me over to the archives and showed me how to work the machines, and I found all these stories in there, and I was digging through the papers. It was kind of disorganized. It was nowhere near what's going on over there now. And I found the transcriptions to these stories so I could read along with them. So I'm listening to Felix Richard telling the story about the green horse,
The green mare.
the green mare, and stuff like that, and learning these stories. And
About a mare that got spray painted green. I could tell you, but it's in French.
yeah, so that was. Then once I'd done enough of that, I started to be able to talk with the old folks a little bit, you know, until I messed up too bad and they switched to English.
But you sort of made French a functional language for yourself. Forced it to.
Yeah, I had to. I had to understand it, and then in order to write songs, I had to understand it. I remember the first French song I wrote. Actually, only took about 20 minutes to write. I sang it for Kevin Berzai on the way back from New Orleans after a gig, not knowing if he would understand it or not. You know, it was a song called Catherine, and I sang him the whole song, and at the end he goes, "It was the same woman."
That's a good sign.
Then I knew that,
That's a good sign.
that it made sense.
So Steve, you came to French in a different way. Although I have to say, I was one of the people I was recording that David was talking about. In the 1970s, I started recording storytellers, along with singers and other people, but a lot of storytellers. And one of the storytellers I recorded was a guy named Bert Guillory from just outside of Mamou. And I was recording Bert. He was an amazing liar, great tall tale teller. I think he's the one who told the story about he had gone hunting, and a cold front came blowing through all of a sudden, and the pond was full of ducks. He was going to get up and shoot one, but then a cold front blew through and it froze so fast, all the ducks got frozen in the ice. And he figured, oh man, we're going to have a lot of ducks for the whole family and everybody in the neighborhood. And he stood up to go get them, and the ducks flew away with the pond. That was Steve's grandfather. And I'm over there recording him. No, Steve Riley was 5 years old, just got back from school, going to visit his grandfather. I'm happy to be recording him, and his grandfather says, "Oh, look, there's my grandson. He's taking French in school. He's studying French in school. Apparently kindergarten or first grade or something." And he said he can sing "J'ai passé devant ta porte." So Steve starts singing "J'ai passé devant ta porte." 5-year-old kid. I don't know who this is. I cared because it was Bert Guillory's grandson, but what do I know more than that? So I'm recording, working, and the tape is still rolling, and Steve sings his little song, 5-year-old Steve singing "J'ai passé devant ta porte," and at the end his grandfather says in French, "Dis ton nom, comment tu t'appelles?" And he said, "M'appelle Stephen Riley." Fast forward 15, 20 years, I don't know why I was listening, I thought, I got a recording of Steve Riley at 5 years old singing "Je passe de fort en port." Like, what's the chance of that, right? But anyway, so you came to it. You spoke some French. You understood some French from home.
Yeah, thanks to my grandfather and to good French teachers that we had in Mamou. And he was a big advocate for Cajun language and Cajun culture, and especially around Mamou. He and a handful of guys brought back the traditional Mardi Gras and the Cajun festival, and he was often the MC. And my grandfather was my world as a child.
He appears in a film that Jean-Pierre Bruno did. He's emceeing on the stage.
Yeah, he would MC and he would leave me in the hands of Dennis McGee, who would, parade me into the bars. And but
It was Mamou.
it was my move. Bars were all a second home from a young age, But I grew up. He passed away when I was 7, which is really unfortunate. When he passed away, my interest in the music passed away with him for many years, until I found his record collection, and I found a record of the Balfour Brothers with Marc Savoy, and I put that on, and it moved me to tears to hear that. And I grew up going to house parties at my grandparents' house in Eunice. My grandmother and Marc Savoy's mother were sisters, so there was always Mark and Dennis playing in house parties, and in Mamou at Burke's house, Cyprien Landreneau and the Mamou Cajun musicians were playing there. So the music always moved me from the very beginning. And my parents didn't speak French. My mom had to help me decipher or figure out the words on the Balfour Brothers records. And I met Dewey Balfour when I was 15, after I'd been playing 2 years, and it was like having my grandfather back in my life. And we hit it off. He was so happy to see a young guy as interested in the music as I was. And I immediately started playing with him and traveling, and it's just a great experience to be able to play with my hero and learn so much from him.
And then I don't know how far I want to go with this, but Steve put together this really amazing young band, the Mamou Playboys, which have become one of the iconic bands in Cajun music today, and are celebrating their 30th anniversary. Yeah, and at Festivals Acadiens. Friday night concert is going to be devoted to celebrating the 30 years. And so Steve was heading a band, was running a band, but whenever they played in Quebec or France, David's got to do the talking. So, what'd you do?
I went to St. Anne's for 5 weeks, and I wouldn't mind going back for another 5 weeks.
French immersion program.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason I bring that up is because, people have various motivations to do this, but, those are real motivations. Pierre Bourdieu said, languages that last are languages that matter. They matter for some reason. They either matter emotionally or culturally or socially or economically, and all of those things piled up in Steve's case because, it's an emotional thing, it was a cultural thing, but he also wanted to be able to represent his own band and at least participate in it. And so what do? Well, you do what you got to do. I'm always amused when I hear people say, they meet me and they know who I am and my background, and they say, "Oh yeah, the French stuff. I gotta brush up on my French one day." You don't brush up on your French. You don't brush up on your French. You either do it or don't.
There you go.
You dive in the pool in the deep end, and you can't just acquire little bits. It's got to become an actual functioning thing. And I tell you, when David came out of the archives. And I sort of accidentally, inadvertently had a conversation that he proposed in French. He started speaking French to me, and I was like, whoa. And we had a conversation for it. I thought, oh my God, look at what's possible. Look at what's possible here. And Steve came back from St. Anne, and he's not just able to say, bonjour, comment ça va? He's able to present ideas and have discussions and do interviews with journalists, which is what you have to do, right? I mean, those of you who have gone to Jordan, you just got back from a trip to New Brunswick. They love us. They love our music. They love the fact that we sing in French, but then we get off the stage and you got to go do an interview and you got to do it in English, and they're saying, what? What is this? What's going on here, right? And so the more all of these people have taken that next step, and gone on to make French not just a nicety, not just an adornment, not just a decoration in their lives, but an actual motor that enables them to function in that way. Chris,
Yes.
want to talk about your coming up?
Yeah, I grew up here in Lafayette and went to French immersion school. So started learning French at a very young age and was kind of just always fascinated by music ever since I could remember. And my family kind of really liked Steve Riley and the Mamou Playboys, and they played their records a lot, and also Zachary Richard records. And that was kind of my earliest exposure to that kind of stuff, and being that I could kind of like hear the words and understand what they were saying, I guess I was more drawn to it than I guess somebody my age normally would have been.
Now, how old were y'all when you started Fufule?
Well, we kind of had like another incarnation of the band for a couple of years, and then when I was like maybe 10 or 11, we started Fufule. So I've been playing since around 8 years old or so.
So there weren't a whole lot of 10-year-olds doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's on a CD if you want to find it. It's pretty embarrassing, but yeah. So I mean, anyway, I just became completely, like everyone else was saying, just kind of like it just consumed my young childhood life, and I was obsessed, and just I've been playing Cajun music for over 20 years now.
So when y'all started traveling, and you did quite a bit as teenagers,
Yeah.
y'all were all able to do, everybody in the band spoke French.
Yeah. Well, most of us. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
And they were all children of immersion,
Yes, that's right.
which gets us back to Codafield's 50th anniversary. It's only because that effort was begun 50 years ago, that was available when Chris was in first grade and second grade, and there was an immersion program. Who would have thought that would have happened 50 years ago? It was and the result of it is that it produces at least a part of a generation that can do this thing that nobody else can do. It is who we are, It's as important as making a gumbo. It's as important as any other aspect of our culture, and except that it's harder. Much easier to learn to make a gumbo. It's much harder to learn to function in French like they did.
It's really hard to do my son's French math problems. Off Francais.
Interestingly, French was banned from school grounds beginning in 1916, and it came back as a foreign language, in high school classes or something. But it's an indication that the extent to which an education in French was unavailable to even the most natural, fluent Louisiana French speakers, is you'll hear an elderly lady say, Quel âge vous avez, madame? Mais j'ai 87. Because you learn numbers, you learn math and arithmetic in school. And so the whole the whole vocabulary of numbers, you ask anybody, even Felix Richard, who's an absolutely fluent French speaker, to divide 3 into 15. Combien de fois 3 va dans 15? And he would say 3 to 15 is you have to go back to what English is the language of math because that's where you learn it in school. French was the language of passion and emotion and love and culture and connection and all of those things, and that's what you hear in the songs. You don't hear anybody counting in the songs. You hear them. 99 ans, you're right. You're right. There were exceptions. But and the song y'all just did, Ils s'en vont en tapant du pied 4x4. Yeah, sometimes every once in a while you hear it. But my point is that, you know, what infused our language, our speaking of French, were the things that came from relationships, family and friends and lovers and lost love and whatever. Y'all down the road, you want to have a say? How did you get involved in all of this? Why are you sitting at this table? Zach Fusier from the Fusier Heatwall band, and among other things.
Oh, I thought you were going to say from Austin, from South Austin.
From South Austin.
No, I got involved, like, I was in French immersion, my parents were in French immersion. It never really, my love for the French language never really took off, never took root until my 5th grade class. And in fact, my teacher's here, Mr. Kirby Jambon. I had never experienced, I was never exposed that much to Cajun French. We'd go visit my mom's grandparents usually every day after school, and mon grand-grand-père demandait quoi ça on avait poutinier. Ça fait, on disait du riz, de la sauce, quelle qualité de viande, and so forth. But other than that, there was no French that, other than in the classroom. So I got exposed to that, and right about that same time, my parents had I would help pick pecans. My dad just got one of those fancy pecan pickers that roll, looks like a push mower. So I'd do that in the mornings, not to let him go bad. But I needed something to do while I was doing that. I didn't want to just do it in quiet, so I wanted to listen to music. So what my parents had Wayne Toops, Balfour Brothers, Steve Riley, and the Mambo Playboys. So we did that, and that's kind of where I started. I got hooked. Then I kind of let it go for a few years. And picked it up. And I picked it up right before I turned 13. My father and I decided we'd take lessons with Mitch Reed, the jam with Steve. Steve was doing that too. There was the jam and a lesson type deal. And that was about in middle school. So at that time, my parents would let me spend weekends at my grandparents' and her parents, my great-grandparents. They had just moved in with her. They were getting very elderly and needed help to take care of. So I would spend the Saturday nights and Sundays over there, and that's where I found the most exposure, the most use of the French language, and I picked up a lot, along with playing with the old musicians like Don Matusé, DL, Freddie Hanks, Milton Vanacore, who was one of Ira Lejeun's fiddle players.
This is the other aspect that we were so lucky. Several people have alluded to this fact that, you know, we had Dennis McGee, we had Dewey Balfour, we had Milton Vanacore, we had these people available to us, and they were willing to sit with us and give us what they had and put up with our difficulty in, you know, understanding or whatever. But you know, I don't know how much that happens just everywhere, you know, that we have access to the past living links to the past like that.
To touch on that too, when Steve talked about Dewey, having his experience first meeting Dewey, I thought directly to when I first met Milton at Mark Savoy's Jam. In fact, I had seen him, I think it was his brother actually, Ellis. Ellis had just played the week before too on the Liberty Theater, and that's when they were still airing it on TV. But here's this old guy, old fiddle player, which I didn't know of many old fiddle players. They still had quite a few accordion players, but there weren't many fiddle players. I said, this is a guy I want to kind of spend time with, figure out what he's doing, to kind of, because it's different than just listening to records of it. To see it visually, it's a whole nother aspect. And so he was getting up. He was always at the front of the circle. So he was getting up to go to the back, and I was in the second or third row in the back, and everybody was moving to let him through. And I was doing likewise, but he said, no, you stay right here. And he got, this man was probably 90, 95, 96, got on one knee, started playing the Louisiana waltz. And he said, play with me. So that was my first lesson. But the fact that, and he reminded me very much of my great-grandfather who had passed a few years earlier.
Again, this brings up two related points: the generosity of the past generations and what Steve referred to, Zachary referred to it as a ferocious interest. All of these people have done this. If they've done it at all, they've done it on purpose. You have to do it on purpose now. It doesn't just fall out of the sky. You have to seek it. You have to go to it. You have to do it on purpose. It's a choice. But what a purpose. What a purpose if it ends up producing, I mean, look at the generations that are represented here.
Well, there's something that's very interesting in this point, and that is being part of a tradition. Because we have our mentors. We have our idols that have taught. I mean, I don't know if you play heavy metal, what is it, Kiss or somebody else? I don't know if you have this notion of being derived from some place, and not some place for some people, you know. And we all knew Dewey Balfour. We all admired Dewey Balfour. We all knew Nathan Abshire. There were all of these people that we had firsthand experience and intimate, well, we had close relationships because of the love of the music. I remember when I started trying to learn these songs, I would follow Mr. Lulu, Lionel Lulu. And one day, there's a lady that he was playing a dance, I don't know where it was, it might have been at the Tribal Club in Scotty, and this lady came up and she asked for a song, and he didn't know it. And he was very upset. And I said, Lionel, Mr. Lionel, it's not that important, you didn't know? He says, no. We have a responsibility. Wow. And that really has been sort of the reason, the sort of driving force behind not only music as an entertainment source, as a dance form, but also as a social engagement. Mm-hmm. You know, this notion that we are responsible. So it's not about us as stars or as whatever, but it's about the common shared experience between the dancers and the players that create this vortex of magic that is something that still exists in this culture, which is something that's exceedingly rare to find in the world today. So
I think so. Yeah,
it's really important to me. And the older I get, the more comfortable I get being a part of something that's so much bigger than I am. You know, I'm not much of a front man. I'm more of a side man. Now I'm a solo side man. But that's where I feel comfortable. You know, I'm a part of something that's bigger and more important than I am, and I get to contribute to it, and I feel very lucky I get to, because I could have missed the whole thing. Could have missed it.
One of the recent arrivals on the scene, as I was saying earlier, is Jordan Thibodeau, and maybe how did you get hauled into this?
Into what?
Into what we're doing, what you're doing.
You called me. No, I don't know. I grew up. I went my grandma a lot, and she talked French all the time, just about all the time. Which I mean, she'd sit in the morning, she'd say a prayer. She'd start with a prayer in the morning. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure y'all all know. All them old people is about as Catholic as the Pope, you know. And she'd sit with her prayers, and it'd take about 4 hours to get to that. And then then you'd have to do them in the evening too, you know. But the minute she was done with that, she'd have to make her calls. You know, she was an old lady, so she had to check with the sisters to see who need to be prayed to, who's dying, who's this, you know. And I mean, the minute she'd get on that phone, that was it. It was French, you know. And then chaque mardi, elle avait un petit jeu de bourrée, you know, and all her little friends would come. And they would sit around the table and they'd play bourrée, and it was her and Miss Jean Mesh and Mabel Hebert and all that. And I don't know, so we was always around it. And for whatever reason, I honestly couldn't tell you why, because to me, it was just there, and we was in it, and we lived it, and it was just something you did, you know. And there was things on the...
How old are you, Jordan?
How old am I now? I'm 33. So she, but you know, it's weird because my sisters had a very different experience with it. And they'll sit and tell you, oh, I can remember, you know, it was all like this, but I didn't understand none of that, and we didn't talk none of that. And it was like, well, yeah, we was in it, you know. And for whatever reason, I obviously just took an interest as a little boy. And when there was something I didn't know, I would ask, you know. And I don't know.
Did you study at school at all?
I mean, I took French 1 in 8th grade or whatever it was, you know, where they talk about the days of the week and all. And I made my little easy A and called it a day, you know. But
by the way, that gets to something I just want to point out in passing. We've all had this experience. There's this perception that Cajun French is remarkably different from France French, let's say. Now, I don't know what you ask anybody what France French is in the first place. They don't even know that. You know, there's dialectal regions all over. But you know, there are some differences. You know, we say tracasse instead of inquiet, or you know, there's a few things that you know we opt, but they're all French words. They're French words, and it's you know it's la main, le doigt, la bague, le nez. So when I was in the first French class I had access to in the 8th grade, French 1. There was this teacher from Quebec telling us that he was going to have to undo all the bad French we knew from home before he taught us some good French. And then he started saying le nez, la bouche, like a la chaise, la table, les lunettes, papier. I mean, it was all the same until we got to that thing. He had sent us, some of us in the back of the room, because he was going to have to undo all that bad French. And he said, as though to make his point, he said, "Qu'est-ce que c'est?" pointing to the window. I didn't say anything because I was scared. I mean, I was terrified. He was the teacher. He knew, right? And somebody in the group said, "That chassis." That's what we call that. He said, "No, it's une fenêtre." Big, heavy Quebecois accent. Fenêtre. I said, I thought to myself, that's a fenêtre. He's right. I don't speak any good French at all. That's a chassis as far as I'm concerned. Well, we sent us all to the back, and the next thing you knew, we were all in the front. He had this old school way of teaching. We put the good students in the front and the bad students in the back, which is counterintuitive, but anyway. We were all up in the front because we all knew this stuff. We all knew how to say j'ai passé devant ta porte. We knew how to say, we knew the difference between j'ai mangé and je mangeais. You know, passé, composé, n'importe. We knew that. I mean, so we were up in the front. 30 years later, 40 years later, I'm doing some linguistic research in Nova Scotia. And I told that story about the chassis. One of the students in the class was Georgette Leblanc's dad, who was a principal at the school there, who had taken for his job, his mission in life, to improve, to correct the local French there. But he was taking my class, I think, to undermine it. Like you know, I was saying we got to value this. And we got to this chassis story, and it piqued something in his interest. He came back the next day and he said, you know, I was looking that up, and the Latin root, the Latin root for the chassis, because it is like a chassis, right? A chassis. It works this way. Latin root for fenêtre was a hole in the wall that you could close with shutters, but it didn't have anything to do with glass. Well, I said, well, I know a fenêtre. They had fenêtre on the old dance halls. They would open the big shutters. That's a fenêtre. Turns out we were right all along. If it does this, it's a chassis. If it does this, it's a fenêtre.
That doesn't do either.
That doesn't do it. That is une vitre.
And Vite,
And vitre.
yeah.
If it doesn't move, like on a car window, or I mean, the front window of a car.
The screen door.
That's right. So, but I mentioned this not to get bogged down in details, but to say that our French is not bad French. It's not wrong French. There's nothing broken about it. Even when an elderly person says, goes to the garage and says, j'ai besoin d'un ring job et puis un brake job. That's become French for them. Je vais aller au village dans mon truck. J'ai vu un airplane au airport. Right? I mean, those have become French words. Exactly like business and management have become French words in France.
Or how naive has become an English word.
Naive, yeah. So, you know, a rendezvous. Deja vu. So, you know, we need to put this, first of all, put aside this notion that is anything broken about our French. Our French is wonderful. The real challenge at this point, as Zachary pointed out earlier, is can we preserve this amazing linguistic resource, cultural resource, in its own terms? Or are we forced to a certain extent, use some importation because the textbooks come from, you know, people who teach standard French? Is there a way to negotiate that? And all of these people have. You listen to them talk, sing, and they all sound like they're from here. You know, otherwise, what's the point? You know, if we're not preserving the variety of the language that produced these stories and songs that make us laugh and have the frissons, then there, to me, the point is not as clear if it's about this. Now, Chris and Zach, and that's about it, the immersion kids, they learned pretty standard French in immersion class, but then rebounded out of it. David started with a French grammar book and rebounded out of it to discover the specific nature of this particular French. So there's a way to do it. Lots of people have done it. But again, you have to do it on purpose. You have to figure out a way to do it. Now, if we don't have a whole bunch of time left. I wanted to get to the creative side of things. The about the lyrics. Somebody mentioned the value of, I forgot who it was.
David.
Huh?
David.
Of lyrics. A lot of people who have been putting out CDs do this. They just write down the lyrics. This is one of the most amazing textbooks.
Oh, yeah.
The most valuable textbooks that I have perceived over the last 50 years that I've been paying attention to this. The ability to, what David was talking about, the ability to listen to the song and read along and learn that way to say it. Right?
I firmly believe that's the best way to learn a language. Because you're not learning vocabulary with no understanding of how to put it together. You know, I can show you 10 million people they know a million words and can't make a sentence, you know? But that is sentences that's made. You understand the use of this and the structure, you know, and the rhythm and just everything comes together when it's in a song, you know? I found that really important. We made sure to put all the lyrics and translations and everything. I wanted that because if I'm not gonna sit and take all my time writing something and putting my heart into it, you know, because I mean song I write, I mean, everybody's got their own way, but every song I write, that's my life, you know? And that's real, and that's my reality. And I'm not gonna take my time to put my energy and my heart out there for people to sit around and not have a damn clue what I'm saying. You know? That's more important to me than how it sounds. That's more important to me than how much you want to dance to it. You know? How much you want to cut up. We can all cut up. I can get drunk with anybody. I can be silly with anybody. I'm here to share a part of myself. And if you can't understand that part, then what's the point?
Well, man, you just waded right into the subject that I was going to try to get into. That is, what is it? It's several things at the same time. It's the language itself. Like, it just got to sound right. I've been with a number of people recording in studios, and what the question is always, does it sound like it's from here? Does it sound right? Does it fall right? Does it sound honest? But also, what do you sing about? What do you write about? What do you care about? What words come to you? What stories come to you?
Me personally, I guess, I don't know. I mean, that's day to day. I mean, just true reality. I mean, again, like I said, everybody's got their own way. You know, there's a lot of people that's got formulas and understand the science and the technicality of it. And I don't understand any of that. I've got zero education. I couldn't tell you what note I'm playing. I couldn't tell you any of it, you know. But if I'm building a fence, I'm gonna sing about building a fence, you know. And if I cut my finger, you better believe I'm gonna say "ow" in the song, you know. I mean, that is what it is.
Ay, ay, ay.
Yeah, something, you know. But it's because to me, if it's not honest, then why do it? You know, if you're not being real with somebody, if you're just wasting your time or putting on a show. If I'm gonna sing about, oh, I love this woman and she died and I'm this and I'm that, and I don't know nobody that's dead, well, I'm not gonna sing it right. And there's gonna be no emotion behind it, and I'm not gonna feel it. And if you don't feel it, then they're not gonna feel it. And then what's the point? You know?
But now you can sometimes tinker with that, right? My wife Caroline and I have a magnificent relationship. Just celebrated 39 years of marriage. Love her. She still gives me the free songs. But I've written a bunch of songs. This may get y'all started. I've written a bunch of songs about a guy who loses his wife and his kids.
I've been saying for 30 years, Barry writes his nightmares.
Yeah. So what? Yeah. Des fois, quand je me lève dans les petites heures de la nuit, je m'en vais pour voir à mes petits. Traverse la maison, moi tout seul dans le noir. Puis là, je me rappelle, ils sont plus là. Tu les as pris avec toi le jour que t'as quitté. Et moi, je connais, je l'ai médité. Mais je m'ennuie autant de mes chers enfants. Et j'aime toujours leur maman. Now that's the story about a man who's realized he's walking around the house in the dark, you know, instinctively wakes up from dead sleep and he goes to check on his kids, and then he realizes they're not here because my wife took them when she left, and I deserved it. I wrote that. That's not the words of a happy married man. But what I do, as David just pointed out, is I allow myself to think, what if I lost this wonderful woman? What situation would I be in? And so I write the nightmare. So you can write,
but still,
you can write reality.
But that's your reality. That's still your reality.
Yep.
Even
Yeah,
without it
it's
occurring, because
sort of inverted.
without that love, you can't understand that loss.
Exactly. It's an inverted reality, or I'm using it in a different
Exactly.
way. What kind of things? I mean, I've noticed over the years, songs about love lost, love found, evolving social realities, nature, the environment. Zachary Richard has got some amazing songs about birds and nature finding each other. Au bord du lac Bijou is one of the most beautiful songs that come out of Louisiana in our time. Where did that come from? He's a bird watcher, I know that.
Well, there's Lac Begnaud. Tu suis une trace. Lac Begnaud is, we show off at Henderson, and then if you get lost, you can stay in Lac Begnaud forever because it's way in the back. And that song actually took 20 years to finish. You asked me about that song. It was called Lac Begno for the longest time. And then it stayed in a drawer for 20 years, and then I was looking for material, and it became Lac Bijou. But no, there's two different, we're all artists. We all create. And our expression is primarily musical. There's two elements. There's the inspiration, and you get your inspiration wherever it wants to come from. I don't think you can control that. I've never been able to say, okay, let's get inspired. Something happens to you in your life, and it means something to you, and it might stay in your heart for a long time before you find the key to unlock the door. The other thing is craft, because you have to work at it as a craftsman. You have to hone your craft. But that initial bit of inspiration, where does that come from? That's the magic of creativity. I don't know where it comes from. And we're all involved in the same process, using the same elements to express similar things, but each one of us and each individual artist, whether they're painters or cinematographers or poets or musicians, has to find his own voice. It's in a way easier for us in the sense that we are defined by a tradition somehow that nourishes that search.
There's a bank of notions, there's a bank of poetic strategies that we all kind of ended up getting in our heads because we listened to Dewey Balfour, we listened to Dennis McGee, we listened to stuff. So there's this storehouse of references, and that's not what we do. We're not just recycling those, but they're there. They're our vocabulary. They're our dictionary, if you will, of symbols and events and possibilities, whatever.
Artists steal. We steal.
Recycle, yeah, we recycle.
Yeah, and like the Cesar Vanson project is just making a richer bank for us to rob.
Have you all heard about this? Very briefly, this has been done before with the Lomax collection and Aegeus Nakan, Dennis McGee, and a lot of other singers, but we just discovered this treasure trove of songs from a subsistence farmer from Vermilion Parish who happened to be recorded twice in the 1950s. And discovered there were 44 songs, and I started calling some of these people and saying, hey, you interested in putting one of these things back into circulation? You should hear what they came up with. It was absolutely stunning. Would you like to hear? Oops, I played.
Let me just say that
Yeah, go ahead.
that Cesar Vanson and his repertoire and his music is pretty incredible. I mean, his recordings are just him alone singing, and he didn't have the most refined voice. So the first time I heard him singing, I couldn't listen for very long, and I was not in the right place. I was just hearing him. I wasn't listening. Once I got into a place where I was really listening, it is incredible. The lyrics, the stories, the melodies, and the rhythms, and the variety that he carried only through singing. I mean, and I haven't really researched and studied ballad singers here in South Louisiana. This is probably the deepest I've ever gone, but this guy's incredible. And he sang in tune, and he held his pitch. But what artists, what musicians and different groups have done, you know, everyone up here participated in this record. It's phenomenal. So,
Well,
I think it's one of the most beautiful records to ever come out of here in a long time.
one of the things that challenged everybody who decided to play along on this, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because this gets back to the other side of this, that is, you know, discovering, honoring, preserving the poetic legacy that we have from the past, which is what, in a way, enables us to, as David says, now with the Cesar Vanson stuff, we got a whole new pile to steal from and or, you know, move along from. But what challenged everybody was the lyrics, because he came from a time, he died in 1970 at age 87. He came from a time when people weren't in a hurry to finish a song. You know, there's one of his songs that lasted 8 minutes, 25 verses. 25 verses.
Are you doing a lyric book?
Oh yeah, 40 pages. It cost us so much more for the package, but we have a 40-page booklet with all the lyrics and all the translations, so that you can read side by side. But otherwise, the lyrical point would have been lost. But the lyrics challenged everybody. They said, "Man, I'm not used to singing this many words." Well, he was used to singing that many words because that's all he had to do, right? I mean, he didn't have a. He didn't listen to the radio too much, or, you know, he came from a time when anybody who knew a song that had 25 verses was invited to all the parties because he was going to fill up the night. He was going to fill up the night.
And his nephew said he recorded about 50 songs, but he knew at least 50 more.
Yeah, at least.
And he had a sister, or there was an aunt in the family that knew the same amount of songs, and she passed away before they recorded her. But he said one of her songs was about if her son, who's a soldier, ends up across enemy lines, treat him like a boy and not a soldier. Take care of him, and I promise to do the same. And it so happened that a soldier came into her presence, and he was really beat up and almost unrecognizable.
Bandaged, yeah.
And she said, "Put down your weapon, rest, I'm gonna take care of you." And come to find out it was her son who had come home from the war. So that's some good lyrics right there. That's just one song.
Yeah. Let me give you just one example. Can you turn that thing on?
A lot of words and cool words too.
Yeah.
Like old words. That was I always like finding songs that's got old words that you don't hear anymore. I like coming across weird words that when I got words in an old song, I always either walk across the street to one of my neighbors. I'm lucky enough to live in a little community where 99% of everybody around me talks French. So when I don't know something, I just walk.
En arrière de ciel, mon père, il y a une oranger de voilà. En arrière de ciel, mon père, il y a une oranger de voilà. Nous irons, nous boirons, nous terrirons les verres, nous les remplirons. Nous irons, nous boirons, terrirons les verres, nous les remplirons. L'on était tellement chargé que les branches tout chantaient de voilà. L'on était tellement chargé que les branches tout chantaient de voilà.
So that's a song about a girl who's got oranges for sale. There's an orange tree behind her dad's house, and it's so loaded that they're touching the ground. So she picks them, and she's going to go to sell them. But she tries to sell them to several people, including the son of the lawyer, and he wants to buy her oranges, but he sends her off to get paid to his dad's house, and then to the doctor's house, and then to the bank, and nobody gives her any money. And she says, "Well, to hell with the lawyer, and to hell with his son, and to hell with the bank. I'm keeping my damn oranges." That's what the song's about. Now, I traced that song back to about the 14th century. It was collected all over the French-speaking world, and it was preserved in the memory of this man, César Besson, until 1970 when he died. And unfortunately, nobody in his family really learned his songs, but he was recorded by Harry Oster and Catherine Blanchette, so we have those. And we have those so that Zachary Richard
En arrière de chez mon père, il y a un oranger, le voilà. En arrière de chez mon père, il y a un oranger, le voilà. Nous irons, nous boirons, nous tarirons les verres et nous les remplirons. Nous irons, nous boirons, nous tarirons les verres et nous les remplirons. L'un était tellement chargé que les branches touchaient la terre, le voilà. L'un était tellement chargé que les branches touchaient la terre, la voilà. Nous irons, nous boirons, nous tarirons les verres et nous les remplirons. Nous irons, nous boirons, nous tarirons les verres et nous les remplirons.
and amazing. I'm just playing you little snippets. It's an amazing creative recycling of that old song, and now that old song that would have been otherwise gone, or at best stuck in an archive somewhere, is back.
But that song is, there's an amazing social commentary because he's talking about the lawyer who's not going to pay for the oranges. And my favorite line is, le fils de l'avocat, il était tellement pas là. He was not there. And tariron les verres, I didn't know the verb, tariron, it's tarir.
To dry the
To dry, tariron les verres.
So she's drinking about it. She's to hell with it. Let me have a drink.
And that's my point.
Yeah,
When
yeah,
you come
yeah.
across a word you don't know, it's so cool. You know, when I could walk and visit, because I pick my oldest neighbors, you know, when it's on a word you can't figure out. And I'm like, you know, you got a man that's 92 years old who speaks French far better than he speaks English. And I'm like, what's this word? I don't know. You must not be saying it right. You know, so I go and I get the recording and I'm like, what's this word? And he says, play it again. Play it again? I don't know what that is. I mean, you got somebody that's almost 100 years old, you don't speak English too good, and they don't know what the word. I'm like, man, we're singing something old.
Well, and sometimes you gotta go there. We have all these people around. As I said, 92-year-old Paul Duyon. I found out that I was trying to get some information about this Cesar Fansal guy. I found out it says 98-year-old man who lives near Leroy remembered Cesar Fansal very well. He said, I used to go to house parties and listen to him sing. And there was this one song that was stumped on. I thought the first line was, Avec ta mère indienne et du coton du nord et de titulaya. What the hell is a tulaya? I never heard of that before in my life. Your Indian mother, cotton from the north, and two little tulaya. So I went to meet Paul Duyon, and he said, yeah, I remember him. I said, well, you think you'd recognize his voice? He said, well, sure. So I just I happened to play the first song I had up, and it was that one. And he said, oh, ça c'est la chanson à Mary Jane. Not La Mère Indienne, Mary Jane. Thank God I went there, because I would have made an idiot of myself with the transcription. And c'est pas de titulaya, c'était de dissulayar. Fabric of 10 cents a yard. The song suddenly made sense. This man was asking for the hand of this woman's daughter in marriage, and he says, look how shabby she is. Give her to me. I can do better. And then suddenly the whole song changed complexion. But it's because we have access, luckily, to these people. Play the original. The original?
Avec ta méridienne du coton du nord de Dissoulayan. Avec ta méridienne du coton du nord de Dissoulayan. Si toi tu l'aimes pas moi, si toi tu l'aimes pas moi, c'est un péché mortel qui fait. Avec ta méridienne du coton du nord de Dissoulayan.
Listen to this.
Oh madame, donnez-moi vos petites filles à moi. Avec ta méridienne.
That song is so crooked. Y'all all encountered that song is so crooked. How did you possibly do that? One of the songs he sang, La Belle et le Capitaine, that Anne Savoy did. Daniel Gale, who's classically trained, she wanted him to lay in a violin part matching the melody at one point in the song. And the only way he could do it was to write out the notes, to notate it. And I noticed he was reading, so I went to look at it. He had discovered that in alternating measures, the song was in 6/4 time, 5/4 time, 6/4 time, 5/4 time, 6/4. That is so complicated, I can't even wrap my head around that. It sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you did that on a dance floor, everybody would break their ankles. And I said to Daniel Gale, what does that indicate to you? And he said, it indicates to me that this is ancient. And in fact, it is an ancient song. Since we have people here, this is what Jordan did with one of his songs.
On les trinquant des juges bitiards, on les comptes de Fontaine éclat. On les trinquant des juges bitiards, on les comptes de Fontaine éclat.
This is a song about Jupiter, the god of thunder and lightning. I know.
Il y a longtemps que je désire danser, viron de fête pas trop court au long des entrevalles. Et quand les rigaudins ont entendu ça, jolis rigaudins, il faut danser.
The jig.
Et quand les rigaudins ont entendu ça, jolis rigaudins, il faut danser. Toby la pierre, ding 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 ding. Toby la pierre, ding 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 ding. Toby la pierre, ding ding ding.
They turned it into a jewelry, which we wouldn't have known about either if it hadn't been for the Lomax recordings. Right? So, and let's see.
Par un dimanche matin, on allant voir la belle.
This is what
Par
Steve
un dimanche matin, on allant voir la belle.
just heard he
Je
was
l'ai
kind of cursing
trouvée
them
de ceux dans
I
les
can't-
malades. La belle en danger de mourir.
And then he said he listened to it and heard a melody and a rhythm. And a rhythm. He came up with that. Turns out, c'est un vrai song, one of the first
Par un dimanche matin, on allant voir la belle. Par un dimanche matin, on allant voir la belle. Je l'ai trouvée dessus sans les malades. La belle en danger de mourir. Je
I mean, it turned into a perfect swamp pop song. I don't know, you want me to play yours too?
Oh, yeah.
The highly produced one?
Yeah. Yeah, this is one of my favorite ones. Chris Stafford recorded and produced this whole project, and
And mixed it.
he had a lot to do and a little bit of time.
Oh, a whole lot to do.
Co-producer.
This is what. Interesting theme, particularly for today. My father sent me to the King's School, and instead of instructing me, he was trying to court me. The king, this young lady. Again, an ancient song that goes all the way back to the Middle Ages. I found about 2/3 to 3/4 of the songs in this repertoire went all the way back to the Middle Ages. Now, I'm going to close this off and get back to our issue, but I want you to hear the 25, just a couple of verses of the 25 verses. We don't want to stay here forever tonight. This is him.
Marie, entend, femme jolie, des hautes qu'il est votre mari. Marie, entend, femme jolie, des hautes qu'il est votre mari. Et mon mari, il n'est pas d'ici, c'est à la guerre, il est allé de mon mari, il n'est pas d'ici, c'est à la guerre, il est allé. Oh oui, madame, femme jolie, vous me donneriez qui passe 3 dans notre doigt. Oh oui, madame, femme jolie, vous me donneriez qui passe 3 dans notre doigt.
Goes on to tell the story of a knight who goes away to war. His neighbor tries to seduce his wife in his absence. She resists because she's faithful. The neighbor copies her 3 rings. She shows her rings as a sign of her faithfulness. He copies them, he memorizes them, goes to the Chez l'Orfèvre. When's the last time you heard anybody talking about going to a goldsmith? Talking about ancient language. And has copies made, goes to the battlefield, and tricks the husband into thinking that he slept with his wife. Husband's enraged, comes back home, and in his rage doesn't question anything. He grabs their newborn child and bashes it against the wall and ties her hair to the pommel of his saddle and drags her around the countryside until the whole countryside is covered in her blood. And she says, not dead yet, why would you do this? Why would you do such a terrible thing? And he says, show me your rings. And she says, she took them off because she was afraid that the other guy was gonna take them. She says, take the key to the cabinet and go and you'll find them where I preserve them. And he goes and he hears the rings, he sees the rings, and he comes back and realizes he's made the worst mistake of his life. And he says, can you ever forgive me? And she says, for myself, yes, but not for the life of our child. If that's all you think of us, when I die, nail 4 planks together and just put us under there. It's a movie. It's a tragic movie, but it's a movie. 25 verses. Can you imagine? Now, this is one of the reasons why this oral poetic legacy was so rich and so important. And the only person I could think to do this was Anna Laura Edmiston.
I guess I have to quit telling people we don't do murder ballads.
We do. We do. And Anna Laura was nursing her own baby when she came to the studio to sing that song. And I thought, maybe I should have asked somebody else.
Marie, enfant, femme jolie, joyeuse qu'il est votre mari. Marie, enfant, femme jolie, joyeuse qu'il est votre mari. Et mon mari, il n'est pas ici, c'est à la guerre, il est allé. Et mon mari, il n'est pas ici, c'est à la guerre, il est allé.
We wanted her to sound like she was in the back of a medieval church. Anyway, that's some of the legacy of the past that's being recycled as we speak. This record is coming, as I said, should land Friday and be available in time for the festival. The other side of this that is also enabled by the ability of the participants to handle the French is the creative side. And I guess maybe we could start wrapping up by talking just a little bit about what inspires us, what strategies. We've already started a little bit on that, but maybe in reference to a particular song, a specific song that each of you composed, that's rooted but new.
That that rooted but new thing is really important to me. I guess because I feel a little bit self-conscious, you know, I grew up listening to the Beatles, you know, and all that. I felt like I came to this from outside, all the way over in Baton Rouge. But way over there. But I've always wanted to take a piece of the old stuff and make something new with it, so that I could be sure I was in the pocket, you know, be sure I was, and that's just become my working method. I've often said it's like, you know, it's like robbing a bank, or it's like, you know how you plant potatoes. You're going to take a potato and you're going to cut it up in little pieces and put it in the ground, and you're going to get lots of potatoes out of it. Well, you take a little piece of an old song and you can make a new song out of it, and that way you know you're extending what's already there. You're not creating something totally new. That's where I like to be, you know. So that's kind of the strategy I use, and so that's and with this record, I've done a lot of ballad singing and a lot of ballad research and learned a lot of ballads. And lately, I'm not all that into that old world sound. I like the new world sound. I like the mixture of Creole and you know, and Acadian that we have here. I like those rhythms. I like that Caribbean thing that's going on. So that made me want to. I sang it straight, but played it syncopated. So that it would have that blend.
Oh, yeah.
Tu chantes une chanson, je voudrais la connaître. Tu chantes une chanson, je voudrais la connaître. Je voudrais la connaître sur le bord de l'eau. Je voudrais la connaître sur le bord de l'eau, sur le bord du vaisseau. Embarqué dans ma barque, madame, je vais vous la chanter. Embarqué dans ma barque, madame, je vais vous la chanter. Je vais vous la chanter sur le bord de l'eau. Je vais vous la chanter sur le bord de l'eau, sur le bord du vaisseau.
By the way, you'll be able to hear a number of people who participated in this project performing some of these songs live next Thursday at Warehouse for the Music City concert. And also during the festival, we're going to have a tribute to Say Thou Van Song for an hour on one of the stages. Steve, you want to talk about, like, I'll give you a hint if you want. The one you did about the one you were in Nova Scotia and missing your family, and the orphelins, what's it called?
Pays des étrangers?
Pays des étrangers.
Yeah, I think it's really important to write new songs and keep the new material coming, in French especially, and we try to do our part where that's concerned. We are in that mode right now, about to record a new record, and everybody's got some songs working, and I use Barry a lot for a sounding board for lyrics, just to make sure I'm saying things the right way, the Cajun way. And Barry has a library of poems and songs, and I've also tapped into a couple of those here and there, just to tip my hat to him, because he does write a lot. But it's an important thing. It's a fun thing for us and for y'all, hopefully. And You can play that one song if you want. That's from a few years back.
Car le soleil levé dans notre pays des étrangers, souvent ma famille dans les voies des petits. Une chanson jouée trop vite, il rit de ma fille, mais y a personne pour m'aimer, pour me soigner, plus de sourire, plus d'amis, je suis tout seul dans le pays des étrangers. Y a personne pour m'aimer, pour me soigner, plus de sourire, plus d'amis, je suis tout seul dans le pays des étrangers.
So that was a brand new song.
It was brand new when
Yeah,
that came.
I mean, it came out. I mean, but it sounds like us. Just part of the challenge, I think, in some cases. Now, this song came up earlier. You mind if I play a little bit?
Dans le sud de la Louisiane, dans le bois d'Atacama, où la rivière joint la levée, planté dans l'anse est un vieux chêne vert au bord de lac Bijou. Dans son feuillage, où les branches font leur crochet, les hirondelles reviennent chaque printemps. Qui se réfugie dedans ce chêne vert au bord de lac Bijou. Tourne, tourne dans mes bras, tiens-moi serré encore, reste avec moi, on bat le chêne vert au bord de la Bijou.
And that song lyrically does something that I've noticed that you do a lot, and it is fuse two things together. Watching birds getting together and, you know, like faithful mates. And then other parts of the verse are about your own mate and your own love. It's just fusing nature and love and in a beautiful, poetic
I
way.
guess I'm a bird.
A real birder. Chris, who did Si t'as fini avec moi?
That's from Ed Desmond.
Who wrote that?
I guess he did. I don't know.
Huh? You did?
No, Ed does it though, I think.
Si t'as fini avec moi.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
It was like a waltz, and we made it into two-step.
One of, by the way, I brought this Anthologie de la littérature louisianaise, d'expression française, of Anthology of Louisiana French Literature. And there's a significant part of this that's dedicated to old ballads, as well as dance hall lyrics, as well as la nouvelle chanson, new creations that are just popping out. This is the extent to which we think this is all important. This is part of our literary heritage. And I would argue that, I have often argued that easily, the most consumed, the most the literary form that matters in that way. The most consumed form of literature for us is song lyrics. Sometimes you get to look at them. Sometimes you just get to hear them. But one way or another, they're affecting us in remarkable ways. Anybody have anything to? Do we have any questions from the crowd or comments? Huh?
Where can we buy? Is that available?
This? Yes. As a matter of fact, this the very last thing, last thing that appeared in this book. Unfortunately, some of these people were. Chris has a song in it called "Les Jours Sont Longs," and Louis Michaud, the Michaud brothers. That's where it ends, and it starts with the very first words that were written in what was becoming Louisiana at the moment. La Salle's brother was keeping a journal on the way down the Mississippi and described the events of that day when they declared that they were taking possession of Louisiana. And it's got everything in between: plays, novels, excerpts, short stories.
Where can we get that?
You can get that from the Center for Louisiana Studies. They probably also have it.
I got it from you.
Y'all got it
so-
from me too? You should. You got it from what?
I got it from you.
Yeah, you can get it from UL Press, and you can get it online. Any other? Yes.
First of all, I want to thank everybody on the panel for sharing your stories and for the incredibly creative ways in which you have arranged your contributions to this preservation of music. And I wanted to ask you, Barry, I'm not sure I understand, on the CD, is the music presented with the raw?
No.
It's just the...
Yeah, well, the Center for Louisiana Studies preferred to send people to an uplink where they can just stream it. Otherwise, it would have been this big. However, Sam Broussard decided to sing with him.
Chantait une chanson brave, brave David. Il est bon chanteur, lui. Là-bas, dans des bois, j'attendais d'une voix, c'était ma bien-aimée. Criant dans votre voix, surtout dans nos amours, la belle pleurait sans cesse. Là-bas, dans tes bois, j'attendais d'une voix, c'était ma bien-aimée. Criant dans votre voix, surtout dans nos amours, je pleurais sans
So he goes from singing on his front porch by himself, or on the way to the store. People say that you could hear him before you saw him. Didn't sing for himself; he sang loud. He goes from singing on his front porch, or walking, to singing with Sam Broussard. Not bad. So anyway, I didn't mean to get stuck on this one project. It's the one that's in our heads at the moment because it's just gotten completed. But there are so many of these things. I'm sorry.
Is he the source of Travailler
Travailler trop dur, yeah.
Yep.
You're gonna talk about on next Thursday. Right?
Yeah,
If
next
you want.
Thursday we're going to talk about
Symposium.
Travailler c'est trop dur. The amazing story of that song became an international mega hit, launched by Zachary Richard, who did a version of it in '76, and it just went viral. I mean, Julien Clerc did a version that was #1 for months in France, and people have done country versions and reggae versions. Alpha Blondy did a version. I mean, it's this unbelievable story of this song that comes out of the rice fields of Mo, Louisiana.
Every tiny French community I played in Manitoba and Alberta, I would do that song and everyone would sing it. Everyone knew it. And all these farmers out in the middle of nowhere knew that song.
But
In 2015, there's a recording of a guy doing a choral singing workshop in Paris, France. And in order to get everybody warmed up, he explains, look, don't worry about it too much. You know, when whole big bunches of people, like 950 people in the theater, when big bunches of people like this sing, it sounds okay, like a national anthem at a football stadium. It sounds okay. It has sort of a mitigating effect. He said, let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's all sing this song. I'm sure everybody knows it. Travailler c'est trop dur. And the whole place starts singing this song. It's like, so, all came from this guy, Cesar Vincent, who was a little bit quirky. In one story, his wife, Olive, it was her job to milk the cow. That was her chore. She got sick one time. Couldn't go milk the cow, so in order to not disturb the cow into maybe withholding its milk, he put her dress on and went out and milked the cow. Amazing practical mind.
it's open to the public next week, isn't it?
Huh?
Your talk is open to the public next
Yeah,
week.
yeah, absolutely.
So
It wasn't
the,
Mardi Gras.
I'm sorry?
It wasn't Mardi Gras.
No.
So Dr. Onsley is going to give an entire, and I'm moderating a panel that morning. I think it starts at 8:30. And then after that, Dr. Onsley is going to talk about Travailler c'est trop dur. And then Roger Mason is going to talk about a French-speaking Native American songstress from Plaquemine Parish, I should say, Alma Barthelemy. And that's free to the public next Thursday. It's sort of the lead-in to festival. So it's the Center for Louisiana Studies that puts it on. So, bye. Here, actually, in the above part of the Codafil exhibit across the way, there's a larger room that can hold more people. And I think if you Google Center for Louisiana Studies, I don't have the site's name in my mind, but there's an Eventbrite where you can reserve tickets and stuff like that, but it's free to the public. You just have to tell us that you're coming. Yes?
I wonder is this repertoire from Dr. Brandon's material?
No.
This isn't from Dr. Brandon's recording?
No, Harry Oster recorded. You mean Cesar?
Right.
Yeah.
Was Cesar in her recordings?
No, not that I know of. Catherine Blanchette recorded him in 1953, and Harry Oster recorded him even more extensively in 1957. And even then, only got about a third of the songs, but we got them. Well, thank you for coming. Appreciate it.